Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War 4.7 patch. Of course, we somewhat went over it on stream about a week ago last Tuesday, when it technically came out. However, about 80% of its features didn't really get implemented until today. So now that all of them are implemented, let's go and mention absolutely everything related to it. So we're going to be going over a bunch of guild tasks, some overall changes to the guild, some overall changes to the trophy system, as well as a bunch of guardians that ended up coming into the game. We're also going to be covering a lot of various teams, such as some of the meta for farming various new parts of the game, as well as the quickest trophy rate in the game, as well as some early game teams that end up utilizing the new Guardian troops, as they are geared, and quite a few things in this patch are geared towards newer and mid-game players. But anyways, let's start with probably the biggest one that many of you guys have seen likely this morning, and that is the new task system. You still have the first 6, and those are completely unchanged and work exactly as they normally do. However, legendary tasks are now locked behind the 6 epic tasks. These 6 epic tasks give the exact same reward as the other ones. As you can see over here, for completing out the blue, you end up getting 4 armor for a week for completing it out, and same applies to the epic, meaning you could essentially get double the amount of stats. It is highly advised for Guild Wars week, of which this is a Guild War week, to do all these tasks. The other weeks are questionable on if you do or do not want to do it, and you kind of discuss that with your guild on if you find it worth it or not. You probably want to do the first few at least, if nothing else, as these first few do give a decent amount of resources. To see what resources any of these give, they simply go and switch between them simply by looking at them, as you can see here. And every single tree has different various ones, with the brown being focused mostly on things like ingots, particularly a lot of epic ingots. They end up changing it to essentially pure epic ingot. The epic is focused mostly on a bunch of food. The yellow has some various tokens in it, and glory in it. The epics, they ended up changing over to tokens. Greens is the most useful, which ends up focusing on writs, and blue they still have as chaos shards. So a nice wide range, and the most noteworthy thing that's on any of these is on the 11th task, you can end up getting yourself a deed. Every single one of these has the deed related to its color, and for every single tree, it's pretty much the only extremely relevant loot that they have. There's some other decent stuff that you can get along the way, some are like arcanes and other little things here and there, but the deed's probably the most noteworthy one. Unfortunately, it's all the way at the 11th. Every single one of these trees take 5,250,000 gold to complete, meaning that to get to legendary tasks, you now have to do an additional 31,500,000 gold, so do be wary of that. You can end up spamming these and get these done just by doing the normal amount of gold, and end up, or the same method that you normally would, where you just keep spamming them up, and ends up working out the same way, and that you can still do multiple at once, luckily. And then once you finally get all of the epic tasks completed, you get to legendary tasks, as they normally are. So if you simply go do this, there is absolutely no change to legendary task. It does take 31.5 more million to get to them. However, legendary tasks will give the same loot that they always do. So if we go over to mail here, you can end up seeing that this is pretty normal loot for a legendary task. Unfortunately, a little bit on the unluckier end, but still pulling from the exact same drop table. Just takes 31.5 million to reach it. So we get our little bit of resources there. And one nice thing about the normal tasks and the epic tasks is they do all go over top of each other. So as you can see here is a bunch of loot that we ended up getting, a very, very wide range. So you can see there's a bunch of deeds mixed in, one per each of the color trees. Got some colored foods. I believe every single tree actually has 6 color of its own food. However, the purple tree has a high condensity of white food, where you can end up getting that, despite each tree having a little bit that you'll end up accumulating over time. Each one has arcanes related to its color, and just a wide range of resources that exist within the game. But of course, writs, one of the more noteworthy ones that are actually unique to any of these trees underneath the green. These are used in order to go, oh, here are a bunch of upgrades for our metals. Of course, getting multiple at once. We get a couple of them upgraded there. Unfortunately, they only go up to Arachnia, so nothing too huge there. But anyways, writs, this is something new in version 4.7. They even gave us 100 of them as a little welcome thing here, as it says, to celebrate the release of the 4.7 update, have these writs. You can craft them into deeds in the Soulforge. So here we end up getting 100 writs, which 100 writs converts over to one single deed. To do that, all you have to do is go under Games, go under Soulforge, and go under Other. And underneath the Other here, you will end up seeing somewhere in this mess all the deeds. As far as what is craftable, there are one for each color deed. which end up costing 100 of whatever their jewel is, 100 writs, which is the new resource that was added in version 4.7. Writs can currently only be obtained at about 160 per week off a green tree by doing the entirety of it. And as you guys have probably seen a little bit earlier, it is possible to get 10 writs off of the ultra rare adventure board. Do keep in mind this does not take away at all from the actual deeds off of adventure board, since deeds are only under epic, legendary, and mythic. However, it does take away slightly from other ultra rare drops that exist. But 10 writs is basically 1/10 of a deed, so not really too much anyways off of that. Deeds currently come in, writs currently come in at a very, very slow rate. Even deeds come in, oddly enough, at a quicker rate than that of writs. But main thing you want to use writs for is deeds of magic. You can craft Imperials, but Imperials are way overpriced in order to end up getting them. They end up costing 1,000 writs, and even at 500 writs, it probably wouldn't be worth it. And they're just way, way too overpriced at the moment. So you're pretty much only going to be doing purple with your writs. The main reason why you'd be going into purple with these is simply because you'd want to do them for the Magic Kingdoms. There are four purple Magic Kingdoms within the game. These include Silverglade, Karkaroth, Darkstone, and Blighted Lands. These are the most important kingdoms in the entire game to go get to level 15. And the reason for this is if you go underneath their kingdom page here, you can see that they are all magic bonus. And getting one of these kingdoms to 15, of course, gives you one additional magic bonus. This means due to this new dynamic, you're likely going to want to save all of your Imperial deeds that you currently have for upgrading your purples up to max, because they are going to cost 3 each, and you are going to need those 3 in order to go and focus the purples, because you're going to be getting purples at a slightly quicker rate now than you might necessarily be getting Imperials. So do be mindful that you might want to stop upgrading some of them to 15 or even to 14 and focus on getting the 4 purple ones to 15 instead, as you'll now be able to get a bunch of writs per week if it's assuming your guild goes for green tree, and with those writs you can start getting purple at a higher rate than you'd be getting any other deed. Though of course a good majority of them still comes off of randomness off of the adventure board. As you can see right here, a simple epic task, which is technically the worst deed related task, still ends up giving 4 deeds, so that's a pretty substantial amount given that you're only going to be able to craft approximately 2 deeds per week off of consistent methods. But still, nonetheless, about 2 additional purple deeds per week on top of the randomness on an adventure board. So a little bit of a method that makes it a little bit less random than that of adventure board is basically what that tried to do. And they'll probably add more writs into the future. We have a relatively small amount when they first started it out. But anyways, other things to mention with the guild, as that is by no means the only change that ended up occurring. One of the pretty nice changes that ended up coming in this patch is a seal increase. For the longest time, seals have been capped at 1,500. However, as of this patch, they have now been increased up to 2,000. So this is a 500 increase, which based on the value of seals and the fact that they're 20 each, that is basically the equivalent of 25 free gem keys per week, assuming you're active enough to get that far. Most people, I would say, generally would get to that point, and even if you're not, and if you're in a guild that isn't as active, the fact that they increased that to 2,000 without increasing the amount that you need to get better drops means that it is now easier than ever to end up reaching 40,000 total seals, since now you technically only need 20 active people in your guild in order to reach it. And even if you do have 30 people, if some people are less active, it will still be much easier to end up reaching the 40,000. So if you're a guild that has commonly only been reaching 20,000, which I feel a lot of mid-range guilds tend to be at the case, where they might not necessarily reach 40,000, as of this patch, you'll probably be able to. One other pretty nice change that they ended up implementing this patch is now whenever you gain seals through alternative methods, like a Guild War win that gives 50 seals, or using an orb that gives 300 or 1,500, this will now permanently increase your, or not permanently, but for the week that you use it, it will increase your cap. So if we end up using a little purple one here, it'll increase it to 2,300 without it actually affecting this other one. Actually, I've never used an orb yet. However, I should probably show it just to show that real quick. So we'll use our first ever orb just to show this real quick. So in the past, you may have noticed that I've said, do not ever use your orbs prior to claiming up to the max of seals, which in this case is now 2,000. However, they changed it after this most recent patch. So if I go use a seal right now, we will get 300 seals. However, what it will also do, as you can see right there, is it now permanently increased our cap. Or sorry, I keep saying permanently, but for the week that you use it, it ends up increasing your cap to compensate for whatever you end up using. So right there, we ended up using 300, and as you can see, we not only gained 300, but it also increased our cap by 300. So now you can use them whenever you want. You don't have to wait until you've maxed them out. As you can see right there, we did not max it out, yet it still functions perfectly and increased our cap for this week. And of course, you can use purple orbs as well in order to go reach 40,000 a little bit easier. And a lot of people tend to use them around the time when mythics come out so that you can throw seal keys towards mythics. Plus, we got 6 new guardian troops, which we'll be going over in a little bit once we get to that point. Other than that, this is all still the same. However, in the shop, we did get some adjustments here, which are pretty nice. These packs haven't been as worth it for quite a while. However, they did make them a little bit more enticing recently. A lot more of the reward, or actually all the reward, now goes to the player that specifically buys it rather than distributing a lot of the reward to the entirety of the guild. So this still gives a really similar value. However, the person that buys it gets almost the entirety of the value, whereas before that wasn't quite the case. A good majority of its value was distributed amongst the guild, which is good for helping out your guild. However, the person actually buying it wasn't gaining as much of a benefit. So now they changed it up a little bit so the person who actually buys these things ends up gaining more of a benefit. The lowest one has a Orber Clans 10,000 gold for guildmate gifts. What a guildmate gift is you can give 25 gems to a guildmate. It's basically the only version of a trade that exists in this game. It does cost money, however, it's pretty much the only way that you can give resources directly to another player other than doing tasks, of course, and just putting more gold into a guild. Other than that, the mid-range one ends up adding a little bit of gems, 2 orbs of clans, and 25,000 gold and 7 guildmate gifts. And the most interesting one is this one. So this has a couple purposes. For one, it adds a new resource, the Pet Gnome Bait. Basically what this will do is whenever you fight, or you can consume this, and the next battle that you end up doing in PvP or Arena will end up giving you a guarantee pet battle. So this guarantee pet battle will have a pet gnome that cannot escape from the battle. So this will make it a lot easier to kill. Do keep in mind, if you lose or disconnect during this battle, you will lose the pet gnome bait. However, the gnome itself cannot escape during these battles. So as long as you don't lose, you don't have to worry about the thing actually escaping. And this will, of course, just trigger a pet as normal, assuming your guild hasn't already have a pet active at the moment. Do keep in mind that if your guild does have a pet active and you do end up using this, the next possible battle when your guild doesn't have a pet active, it'll end up triggering the guarantee pet gnome drop. It isn't really too useful overall, and for $20 just to get that, it's relatively overpriced. However, you are getting a lot of other things along the way. Hopefully they'll add some kind of other method to get a pet gnome bait, or maybe even make it so it's capable of focusing a specific gnome, or even make it automatic to make sure you can't accidentally lose a battle. So do make sure if you do end up using a pet gnome bait that you use it when it's at a very, very easy battle, something like 4 times firebomb or something super easy that you won't lose. Other than that, it gives 500 gems, 4 Orber Clans, which is the equivalent of 1,200 seals, which is the equivalent of what, 60 gem keys basically, 60,000 gold, and probably the most interesting of 15 guildmates gifts. 15 guildmate gifts, that comes out to, what is that, 25 each? That should be about what, 375 gems. So not only is this overall a decent amount of gems, that's a lot of gems that you can give to your guild. And I feel like the biggest thing this will be used for, and one of the more enticing things that this is actually useful for, is guild kind of tournament kind of things. So for example, with your guild, you can now incentivize a little bit easier objectives. So for example, if you want a lot of people to go and contribute gold to your guild on a given day, and you're a guild leader or someone pretty high up and you want to go and set something up for that, basically what you could do is announce it to your guild, either through your guild chat, Discord, other things, the little announcement thing, and basically have a competition. So you could give like 8 of the guildmate gifts, which is what, 200 gems, to first place, whoever gains the most amount of gold in a week, and then something like 5 of them to whoever gets the second highest, and then 2 to the third highest, or something similar to that, where you could basically have a competition within your guild to incentivize getting more tasks done and more resources overall, and they'd end up getting some gems by doing so that you can gift them directly. Before, the things used to only give 1, 2, and 4, basically, or it costed essentially $5 for each of these. However, they are now substantially cheaper to do, which makes it a lot easier to utilize them for various things such as that. So it's kind of interesting pack. Still personally don't consider it too overly worth it, but I know some people will go for it, and out of every purchase that they've added in recent times, it's probably one of the more enticing ones, other than the some of the flash offers that end up popping up. But also, these are all limited to 1 per week, as they normally are. But other than that, there is still more guild changes. Other than that, Guild Wars got some modifications, 2 of them. For one, as far as scoring now, You no longer need to worry about if you don't have a full guild. Of course, one issue that has happened many times in the past is the fact that you might not necessarily have a full guild, and if you're something like 29 out of 30 and you're in like bracket 1, 2, 3, or really any high bracket, you pretty much auto lose or possibly even auto get last place simply by not having a full guild. However, they have now made a very, very useful change in for Guild Wars, where it's now only counts 27 out of 30. So basically what will happen is the 27 highest scores that you end up getting in your guild will end up counting, whereas the lowest 3 will not. So if you still have a 30-member guild, that's still fine. The 3 lowest people in your guild, someone having a bad day or just got really unlucky, will not count. And this is also going to be really good for, obviously, if you're missing a person, or if you're trying to recruit a person, or if you had to kick a person, you would no longer be penalized during a Guild War week, since if you kicked a person and you were already one person short, you have 28 out of 30 now. However, it's only going to count 27 of those, so you won't have any penalty for doing those kind of things during a Guild War week. This has been a big issue for a while, it's been suggested for a while, and it has finally been implemented to the game. So, yeah, long story short, 27 high scores will count, so you don't need to worry as much about recruitment for Guild War weeks, and you can kick people still if you need to, whereas prior to that, obviously, you could never do that during a Guild War week. One other thing to consider now during Guild War weeks is it is actually somewhat strategic to have a slightly lower bracket if you're in a bracket that isn't all the way towards the top. The main reason for this is, as you guys know, as far as the loot that ends up coming in through the lower brackets, not really that enticing. A lot of these are pretty low overall. The only place where it's really particularly good is in bracket 1. However, you can now get 50 gems whenever you end up getting a win. So right now, we might be in something like bracket 6. However, we might be getting more loot than most of the people in the upper brackets above us, like in brackets 2 to 5. And the reason for that is everyone in bracket 2 to 5, or a good majority of them, will be getting 125 gems. However, if you make first place in your bracket, as an overall first place of the 10 people in your bracket, you will now get 50 additional gems. So there's now more of an incentive to, of course, go for that first place, which means in all the way in bracket like, what is this, 10, 11, 12, 13, stuff like that, everything from like 10 to 20. If you end up making first place in that bracket, you are getting yourself 125 gems, meaning you're now fending in first place within this bracket range of around 10 to 20. You're now basically getting the same loot as someone who doesn't make first place in bracket 2 to 5. And similarly, in something like bracket 5 to 10 or so, if you end up making first place, you're now getting 150 gems, which is actually technically more than what 2 to 5 is getting if they don't make first place. So kind of interesting how this dynamic ends up panning out. So there might actually be some strategy to deliberately keeping a lower bracket now, given that if you can farm first places while still maintaining one of these decent gem rates right here, you're pretty much fending as good as something like a 2nd to 5th. And it only really gets better loot if you happen to make top 10. So, or, you know, bracket 1 within top 10. So, kind of interesting overall, that dynamic. So how your guild wants to go about that, you can kind of discuss. But long story short, 50 additional gems if you make first on a Guild War week. And also those 50 seals should end up increasing your cap. So of course, every single time you do a Guild War battle, if you win for the day, you do get 100% XP for the following day. That's still normal, as well as 50 seals. That's still normal. However, to our understanding, though, we'll find out after tomorrow, or I should say the day after tomorrow, on Wednesday, that 50 seals should increase your cap. We'll find out soon. They haven't actually confirmed 100% or not, one way or another, I don't believe, but we'll find out very, very soon. Other than that, I believe I went over everything there. So trophies. Trophies got quite a bit of revamp. As you guys know, prior to this patch, the only two locations where you could really get trophies is Arena, which you'd get 30 per run, which was previously the highest rate of trophies, no longer is it, where you'd get a little bit more than 3 per battle. And of course PvP, where you could get 1, 2, or 3 trophies off of doing these. Or if you go to casual PvP, you can simply get 1 trophy each. So these used to be the only locations where you could get trophies, that and Guild Wars. A little bit while ago, they added it so you could get 2 trophies during all of the sigil-related events. So these are things like raids, invasions, stuff like that. All these sigil-related ones over here. So they ended up adding that. However, we did end up getting some additional ones. So now, pretty much everything ends up giving you trophies. Your adventure board, 1 trophy each. Every single one of these, boom, 1 trophy. Dungeons, 1 trophies. Quest lines, 1 trophies. whenever you do the normal quest lines, which have a static amount, which of course I have all completed, and most people have all completed, but you still get trophies there. The delves, you end up getting 1 trophy each, so you're doing your daily delves, each one of those ends up giving you 1 trophies. They also ended up adding a new feature this patch. While we're down here, might as well mention it now. If you go under a delve where we don't already have all the battles done, let's see. So right here, you can see we have a 500 option, and what is this? A level 50 option. So this still doesn't completely fix the issue that delves have, in that level 20 battles on 1x multiplier are still better value than that of doing a 500. However, they did add a new little feature, which is still not as good as doing level 20s at 1x multiplier. However, you can now, even if you have a delve maxed, or any point above 60, you can now do 50 at a 0.5x multiplier. So this will always be available for every delve that you have leveled up. And if you have leveled up literally every single delve in the game, this now gives you an option to go and farm up class XP and stuff like that off of a semi-easy battle. Wish they would have made it level 20, and I wish they would have made it 1x multiplier. But unfortunately, they did not. Still not as good as farming a level 20, so anyone who's still farming City of Thieves at level 20 still has a great advantage over anyone who is not, or a similar faction in that regard. However, this is a small fix to that, as it at least gives some accessibility to everyone who's been maxing out every single faction. But it's not a perfect fix, but nonetheless, at least they did something for it for the time being. So that's what they ended up doing with that. And other than that, other places where you get trophies. So, challenges. Of course, challenges that were added, what, 2 patches ago or so? 3 patches at this point. These now give a bunch of trophies as well. From 1 to 4 challenges, you get 1 trophies. From 5 to 8, which is where this is categorized, you would get 2 trophies each. And for 9 to 10, you would end up getting 3 trophies each. So if you haven't done most of your challenges like me, you now gain trophies for them as well. So might want to consider it. Becomes even more enticing. Might want to wait till a Gnome event as well, since they are a little bit better value. And the weekend after Christmas, I believe, is the next Gnome event, so you'll be able to do them then if you want. Other than that, the most noteworthy change that ended up occurring with this whole trophy system is Explore. So it is now possible in Explore to gain trophies, which now makes Explore even more enticing than it has ever been, given it's the only location to really farm medals, and now it even gives trophies while also having the highest gold rate in the game, given that they did some tweaks to gold unintentionally this patch. I believe they mostly reverted it back, but it's still in the case where Explore is better gold overall, if you can quick kill it. But anyways, Explore 1 to 4 now gives 1 trophy, so if you're doing really quick kill theirs, or if you're doing soul farming, even soul farming now, which in prior has never given trophies, now gives trophies. 5 to 8 in Explore ends up giving you 2 trophies each, meaning that 5 is the lowest that you can do in order to get 2 trophies, which is relevant for something we'll be going over in a moment when we go over teams in a little bit. And 9 to 12 Explore end up giving you 3 trophies each, which of course is where going to be your good majority of your location, given that that is the only location you can get niches, 10, 11, and 12, and obviously you do 12, as that is the highest rate for niches and the highest rate overall for everything. It also gives the highest amount of shards, so you'll be able to cycle through medals quicker, and it has the highest rate of gold. So generally, the only locations you tend to go in is 1 to 3, 5 as of this patch, as we'll show in a team in a moment, and 12, because 12, of course, is where you farm all the medals at. So 1 to 3 for resources, 5 for trophies, highest trophy rate in the game, and 3 is for, 12 is for medals. Anyways, other things to mention real quick. So, Guardians, this is a whole thing in itself. We got 6 new troops this week. They are in the seal drop table, and they will permanently be in the seal drop table. Basically, how this drop table works now is there is now 12 Guardians in it, 6 of the previous 6 guild Guardians, and now 6 of the new ones that we ended up getting implemented in this most recent patch that literally came in today. I believe they were in a little bit earlier on console. That was not intended, but on PC Mobile, they just came in today. So if you open up any amount of seal keys, you will notice that there are a bunch of Guardians. So if we go and open up here, we will see that we got things like Defiance, Finesse, and Treachery, all of which are some of the new Guardians. Basically, how these work is you may have noticed we got none of the 6 previous Guardians. This is because if you've gotten any of the Guardians to 4 copies of Mythic, they will stop dropping. It is highly advised due to this and how valuable seals are and how they are basically like gem keys. 2, if you have a large reserve of major blue orbs, it is advised to consider using them. You could save them for future content. However, if you simply go and get one of these ascended to Mythic, they should stop dropping. So we're going to go do that right now just to kind of show it. And we're going to go and ascend all of them except for 1, because I only have 5 major blues and I've not been able to get a 6, unfortunately. But I believe they have to be, the only 3 things you have to do, I believe, is level them and have them ascended to Mythic and have 4 copies of them. Those are the only 3 conditions. I'm not sure if you actually have to leveled. I know for sure that you have to have it ascended and at least 4 copies. Whatever other things you need on them, I'm not 100% certain, but that should be it. You definitely don't need them medaled, and you definitely, or that's the only thing I know for sure. But you can easily get them traded if you're at the point where you can end up ascending them anyways. So simply just trade them, get them to 20, and yeah, you won't get them dropped anymore once they're at full ascension with 4 copies. So we'll just go and do that real quick. Do that for every single one of these and get them to the point where they will no longer drop. And we'll be able to see, once we only have 1 left, that all of the Guardian drops that we have will end up being of that one. But yeah, these are somewhat interesting troops. Each one of them ends up giving a bonus towards a specific typing, which is going to make them decently viable, given that they give 4 to all stats of a certain typing. Unfortunately, some of the typings that they end up using them for are relatively bad, and that is by design, obviously, to make sure that people wouldn't be able to just go and make like ultra overpowered teams. Like obviously they didn't do it with something like Divine or something like Elementals. That would have been insanely broken if they did. But they did end up doing it for some of the typings that don't get much love. Some of the weaker ones like Nagas and War Gears, and things that you're generally probably still not going to be using even after this change or these new troops. However, they're made a lot more viable, especially the War Gear one. They end up making this super viable. 25% Devour on top of its ability. Basically what these things do as far as their breakdown, I haven't even mentioned it yet, but they're all premised around a single color, similar to the other Guardians, all at 11 mana cost. What they do is they deal damage to an enemy, as well as a second enemy at random, and this will end up doing double damage to them based on if it's the same color as them. So obviously this is a green, so it'll end up doing additional damage to green. Each of them also have an additional effect, either a boost ratio or some kind of effect specifically, with this one actually having the best one in that it has a 25% chance to devour a random enemy, which if it ends up getting that will be insanely good because it synergizes well with the traits that these all have. The traits are very similar in all of them. They deal double scroll damage to whatever their color is, so this is green, so it does double damage against green. It has stone skin, all of them have stone skin for 50% score reduction, and they all have a unique 4 to all skill to a certain typing. In this case it's War Gear, but all 6 of them have a different one, and all of them are the typing of whatever they are, of course. So this is a War Gear bonus into a War Gear, and they all have the construct typing. So they're all construct in whatever their typing is as far as what they give a bonus to, which is different for each one of them. But we'll go and get this last one ascended just so we can go and show this real quick. Use our last major blue orb. Hopefully we don't need it for anything else into the future, as that is my last one and they come in so slow. I feel like I haven't gotten one for like 2 months now just because of bad luck. I think they're like 15% chance whenever you get a random major orb thing. But now, as you can see, the only one that we have not maxed now is the Treachery. So now if we go and go over to our drops, we should only be getting, let's see, which ones haven't we gotten? So we should only be getting 2 drops now, Ferocity and Treachery. The reason we'd still be getting this is we have 2 copies of it. We still haven't hit 4. Oh, same as the Finesse. So let me go and open some, get those up, and we can kind of go and see that real quick just to show that they do indeed not drop anymore. So we should be getting just those few until we end up getting them above their threshold. So I believe we just got both of those above their threshold of Ferocity and Finesse. These should both be at 4 copies now, meaning that if we open up some keys here, these should all be Treachery. Every single one of these should be a Treachery. So as you can see, all 4 of them are Treachery. The other ones don't drop. I'll go do it one more time just to show. Every single one of these should be a Treachery. And as you can see, every single one is still a Treachery. So basically, as I said, once you get into 4 copies of Mythic fully ascended, they stop dropping. So now if we just keep opening them, we will only be getting ourselves a bunch of Treacheries underneath the Guardians. And then once you have that done, you will basically be right back to normal gem key drops from your seal keys, which is highly advised, as having seal keys being valued at gem keys is very, very useful, to say the least. But of course, we could just go and get a bunch of copies on this if you don't have enough orbs of ascension, the major ones. You can use a minor orb of ascension on its final level, which is probably what I'll be doing. So once we get this thing to legendary from opening seal keys, we'll then go and simply get it to mythic from that point, and then our seal keys will be the equivalent of gems once again. So that's all you really have to do with those, and end up using them. So teams, let's get into that now that we've gone over all that. So there are a lot of teams I want to mention, 9 of them to be exact. So let's get into that. First things first, let's go over the teams that are particularly useful for farming things. So this one is actually new as far as it being useful for something, and that is, let's just find a random 5. Generally, I want to find a kingdom that does not have anything that can end up reviving here, or having any kind of mana drain or anything like that. Let's see, let's go and, you mostly just don't want to find anything that has like a 25% revive or any kind of spell reduction. I believe Stormheim is fine for that. So normally I just do everything in our Arcaea, but I want to show it for the other one. But let's go and go to explore here. Do this at level 5. The reason we're going to 5 is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in this video, you do get 2 trophies for 5 battle. And the first one I want to go over is the quickest trophy rate in the game. Phoenicia actually is in Soulforge this week too, so if you want to pick her up as of the week of watching this video, she is actually in Soulforge. I don't feel like too many people will end up using this team, though to my understanding, this is the quickest team in the entire game for farming trophies as of this patch. You just go to any kingdom that you want to go and possibly farm up trait stones in, ideally none with a revive and none with a spell reduction. You use a hero class that has a firestorm, any hero class with a firestorm will do, and then you cast, and this should one-shot. So as you can see, this ends up one-shotting the enemy team if you have enough magic. The main reason for this is Phoenicia has a lot of, actually, one other thing we'd want to do is go set to pure magic if you happen to have it, as that does make it a little bit better and a little bit more consistent, especially if you have slightly lower damage. But basically, Phoenicia, a mythic that prior to this patch, I would have said is one of the, maybe not most useless mythics in the game, but definitely below mid-tier. But now it's become the highest trophy rate mythic in the game, or troop in the game in general. Main reason for this is this gives 2 trophies, and you can still kill it as quick as a 1-trophy battle, assuming you can one-shot instantly the enemy team. And the only thing that I am currently aware of that can instantly get first turn full mana into a one-shot entire enemy team is Phoenicia. So she ends up getting double the amount of damage whenever there's a firestorm, and this combined with the fact that she boost ratios off of every red on your team on the board, a red mana gem, as well as burning on the opposing team, gives her enough boost ratio that she will just go and one-shot tier 5 explore. Main reason you'd want to do tier 5 is it's the lowest one that you can end up doing that has the 2 trophy, and because we can get 2 trophies within like 20 seconds per 2 trophy, we can do this for the highest trophy rate that has ever existed in the game. It is above 180 trophies per hour. You could probably push a little bit higher than 200 trophies per hour even with this method, assuming you have the full setup, and there's almost no counter to it in many kingdoms. The things you'd mainly want to avoid is make sure there's no revive on death, so 25% revive, 50% revive, things like that. Any kind of kingdom that has any amount of that you'd want to avoid, and you'd also want to avoid any place that has spell reduction, as a 25% spell reduction, depending on how much damage output you have, will make it so they end up surviving, and obviously something like a 50% would also end up making it so they survive, so just be wary of that. And as long as you do that, then yeah, you'll be good to go with this team. And the main component you really only need that is hard to obtain is the Phoenicia, and she is in Soulforge this week if you happen to have some diamonds laying around and still haven't obtained her. Unfortunately, she might not be available by any other means anytime soon, but if nothing else, as of this exact moment in time, she is over in Soulforge. Right over in... Oh wait, was she not? Never mind, I lied. She's not. I confused her with Suna for a moment. Never mind. Well, that's actually somewhat a good thing, because that means you guys have time to go and farm up some diamonds, because it's pretty recent that she became viable. As of last Tuesday, she's been viable. Never mind, my bad. Why did I think that was a Phoenicia? I did that the same thing in the... I'm pretty sure you guys remember when we did the Mythic tier list video. I did the same thing with Phoenicia and Suna too. I'm not sure why, but they both look like the exact same troop to me when they're not side by side. I always do that. Anyways, ignore that, but you'll be able to get Phoenicia hopefully soon, TM, and by then you'll likely hopefully have enough diamonds, since you now know if you want to possibly go for it, you can save for it. Not that important to get her necessarily, but if you want the highest trophy rate in the game, that is how you do the highest trophy rate in the game now. I'm not aware of anything that is higher than that as far as trophy rate. Anyways, next team, you'll want to go with a 20% mana start and some life, or any kind of durability, and this is a Scorpius team. Most of you are probably aware of this. Arcaea is currently the only faction, or the only kingdom in the game that has no immune to poison. And the main reason why you'd want to do this now, even more so than ever, on top of the fact that it's the highest medal rate in the game, as well as the highest gold rate in the game, is it's now also really decent trophies. Now, instead of getting 0 trophies per battle, these battles now give 3 trophies. And you can get these battles done in an average about 30 seconds each or so. And with that being said, that is also one of the highest trophy rates in the entire game, given that you can easily cycle through these battles in about 30-35 seconds or so by using this team. So on top of all this that you would already be getting from this being one of the most enticing spots to even bother farming, it's now gotten even better because you basically just get loaded up with trophies as you're farming the much needed metals. So trophies have become so much more devalued and much easier to obtain as of this patch. Trophy rates are probably on average anywhere from like double to like quadruple depending on what kind of methods you generally do within the game. I know personally I don't spend much time in PvP and such, but still I'm somewhat active within the game, obviously, since we play every single day for at least an hour or a few hours. And with that, we now gain trophies from everything, meaning I feel like I get on average like over 1,000 trophies per week now, prior to before where it would have been like 150 to 200 or so. So a substantial increase just from the fact that they now exist pretty much everywhere. And this, of course, is one of the other better methods to farm them while also getting a lot of very needed endgame resources, since gold is even more important as of this most recent patch, given that, obviously, with the changes that end up happening to guild, you now need a lot more gold to get the tasks completed, 31.5 more million gold, in order to go and complete out to be able to do legendary tasks. And of course, if you're still early on in the game, you'd still want to have more gold too. Even if your guild is only doing all the normal tasks, if you aren't planning on reaching legendary tasks, you can at least do possibly the green tree, which ends up giving you Ds, of course, or you can end up doing up to about level 3 or 4 or so in every single task, which will give you a solid small amount of resources, but while still giving you somewhat the equivalent of what legendary tasks would. But anyways, let's go and go over the other teams. All these I don't believe I'll be using, except for one. Let me see. Where's our PvP teams? Let's see. So, a couple other teams I want to go mention over. Yes, High Guardian. So this is a bit of a weird team. Do I even fight it against this? I guess why not? So here is the only team I ended up building so far with the new Guardians for endgame. The other 6 that I'm going to be showing are for early game, defend, for Guild War. I know a lot of people normally ask me what to use for defend in Guild War, and some people might not have as many options. So I want to go over a few. Do keep in mind that the options I will be showing for that are going to be super ridiculously cheap and towards like being able to obtain it within your first month of playing, so super early game. Basically, you'd be able to obtain it by next, even if you literally just started, you'd be able to obtain it by the next Guild War that ends up coming around in a month. It happens every month. But anyways, we are going to have a freeze problem with this team, so we will not be able to use this team against this. However, let's go retreat. So basically what we're going to be doing here is a Ketris buff kind of team. Can we fight anything that doesn't have freeze? Why does everything have freeze all of a sudden? Here we go, life and death. If we can win against life and death, that's a pretty good sign. But let's go use it against this team. So basically what we're going to do with this is a Alchemist Moneylender combo. A combo I haven't really been using much, however it is pretty noteworthy for this. And it's also pretty accessible other than the fact that this uses Ketris. But basically what we'll be able to do here, if he doesn't end up getting that web, gosh, why is everything getting such a quick start on us all of a sudden? Well, we'll go for this. Start getting our mana. We're just going to have to wait out the web, as it is important for us not to be webbed on stuff to actually be able to get this going. One interesting thing about web that is a mechanic that isn't normally used too often, however is a bit of a disable to us, given that this, excuse me, gives 4 to all stats, is it does end up giving a, it makes it so you can't gain magic. So Entangle makes it so you can't gain attack while for the duration that you're entangled. However, there's a similar effect that ends up happening off a web, where for the duration of a web, you're not allowed to end up gaining any amount of magic, so do be wary of that. So for this, we actually don't need magic on him, do we? So we can actually end up getting ourselves a little bit buffed here. Unfortunately, that doesn't end up gaining magic, so we're probably going to have to still wait it out just a little bit, but we can gain all the other stats off it if nothing else. Come on, get unwebbed, you know you want to. We need it. We need it so badly. Come on. It's going to be one of those times where we stay webbed for like 1 billion years. Or he'll die to death mark. There we go. Okay, that's the only thing. Him being webbed actually has no effect on this team. So, if we didn't get disabled there, very unfortunate. But now, of course, we can just do some normal money lender shenanigans, in which case we kind of just keep mana looping over and over and over again in order to go and feed ourselves a bunch of stats. This is a method that has been used somewhat in the past before. It's never really been too excessively viable as of recently. However, in combination with things like this, and now that you can just go and buff Ketris like crazy, it might get a little bit more usage. Still feel like overall the Guardian troops aren't going to see much usage just because they are really restrictive in the kind of teams that they can use. And most of the ones that they apply in, there are already a lot of colors. For example, there's a lot of red Tauruses, there's a lot of green Wargears, and the things that they synergize to, a lot of yellow Strixes. The things that they synergize to don't necessarily have much of a, not necessarily a synergy lacking, but more so a lacking in the fact that they use too much of the same color, and putting a single thing that has one single color on your team, not really going to work out the best. But from what I've tested so far, and we will be testing more into the future as far as end game stuff with these, but they seem like they're only really going to be used for Guild War instances, from what I can tell, particularly a defensive style, given that that'll be a guaranteed chance that they will be the color. Because, of course, right now we're capable of doing double damage against reds, obviously not up against any reds in this particular instance. However, if the entire enemy team was red and we're dealing double damage and we're dealing something like 59 times 2, that is definitely not that bad. Actually, it's even more than 59 times 2. He has a boost ratio based on all his stats as well. So add 35 to that, we're up to, what is that now? That's a 94. So 94 times 2, what is that? That's a 188. We can do 188 damage to 2 reds per cast for only 11 mana. That is insanely good value, to say the least. And being able to do stuff like that is what's mainly going to be viable for it. But outside of any kind of instance where you can end up fighting a pure color team, it's not really going to get much usage. And even in something like, let's say, what's it called? Tower of Doom, you wouldn't even see it either, because they don't really have much of a boost ratio, so you're not really going to be able to use it in those kind of instances, unfortunately. But nothing else, there's still Guild War options. But let's go grab ourselves a red over there. See if we can go get this final kill on this thing. Of course, annoying life and death being its normal self. One other thing, this should, I actually haven't tested this yet, but oh gosh, no, of course it would get a summon as soon as I say I want to test it. Why you gotta do that? But it should be allowed to hit the same target twice if there's only one remaining. Unfortunately, now that we're webbed, we might as well just retreat from this battle, because life and death is going to be life and death and be like an extremely long annoyance. There are teams that can counter it, of course, but that is not one of them, given that this is more so a red kind of counter team. But anyways, let's go over the early game kind of stuff. So do keep in mind, these are all extremely cheap teams. I made sure not to use any legends, and if I did use a legend, they are simply a Delve legend, which isn't exactly the same as a legend since they're really easy to obtain. And I made sure all these weapons are weapons that are super easy to obtain from any part within the game. Each one of these teams are easily obtainable within your first month of playing the game. And these are just some kind of things that you can end up using for Guild Wars if you so choose. Do keep in mind, these are really geared towards early game and mid game, only if you have no options. These are obviously not meant for later on in the game, as there are much better weapon options, and obviously you can use legends and mythics once you're later in the game. But these are all going to be cheaper options. So this is a green defense that you can end up using for green Guild War. And of course, all these teams will be in description as well, all 9 of them. So this, of course, has a 25% devour, going to be insanely good. Best of all the Guardians from an actual cast perspective, and probably overall as well. The only problem is it's war gear related, and not too many good war gear teams out there. However, in this context of the team, it probably will be fine. So this thing ends up doing its standard double hit. It ends up doing double to green, double on skull damage to green, has a lot of tankability, gains even more stats off of devour, and it will end up increasing your stats of war gears. This is still relevant with this team, as we are using Savage Hunter, which is a war gear. This thing ends up doing a lot of damage with a triple damage to a green, and obviously your entire team that you're going to be fighting is green, because this is a green war defend team, so green Guild War defend team. So you'll be able to do double damage off of that, off of 2 different instances, skulls and this, as well as having triple damage on this. Even if you somehow die, you have a double damage against green into another double damage, meaning he actually does 4 times damage against greens plus enrage, which means if you stack all those together, he does a 6 times damage to greens. Yes, 6 times damage. That is correct. He hits that hard on greens. You could maybe even possibly put him in the first slot. However, Persistence does have a better cast than Savage Hunter, especially since you distribute it more if they're doing single barriers or something like that, since they won't be running Dawnbringer, obviously, since they can't on a green day. But yeah, you can, all these do stack. All 3 of these do stack onto each other. They ended up buffing this like crazy several months ago, and it's basically like a mythic as a rare. It's pretty funny. But now you'll be able to give him extra stats off of Persistence and make him into just an absurd, absolutely absurd green counter. It's basically like a 2 times web spinner. Like imagine web spinner, but twice as effective. And that's basically what he is for green Guild War. So you have that as an option if you want to go and mess with that. The hypothesis here is to go and converting over into skulls, and with that you'll be able to go and not only deny the enemy's green, but also give yourself a bunch of skulls. Unfortunately, you'll be denying your own ally greens. However, your skulls are where you're getting a good majority of your value, obviously. It has Empower if you happen to be able to get those, and be able to do that immediately. However, it still function to a degree even in early game without the Empower. And other than that, this is we just put a standard weapon that you can end up getting. This is a legendary weapon, however, it's super easy to obtain. Rarity of weapons don't necessarily actually mean how hard they are to obtain. This you can simply get from getting a bunch of blue and purple mastery, and you'll likely get it by level 150 or so within the game, so super easy to obtain. Obviously, there are better weapons out there, but as far as easy to obtains that can be slotted there, this is for a little bit of freeze to assist you is the way to go. But yeah, this in either order. I ends up doing it in this order just because it's a little bit safer this way, given that it is going to be ran by AI. Because one slight issue with Savage Hunter is it does die very quickly, and if they're using Web Spinner, since this is a green day, it'll one-shot your Savage Hunter. So even though you can one-shot them, they can also one-shot you, whereas this will not be one-shotted with 50% skill reduction, or at least less likely. And by the time that this does die, this will have enough stats off of the extra turns, hopefully, that it could at least survive a hit, if nothing else. So that's the main reason for that. And still, same general premise can be applied to late game, of course, except you would obviously replace out the last 2 slots most likely for slightly better options. Other than that, Brown Guild War. So, as far as what we have for Brown, we have ourselves a Urskea team. Most of these I tried building around the troops itself from the kingdom as well, since given that you're going to be using this in an early game, not only will you end up getting a troop bonus, which would be more effective earlier on in the game, but you'll also be able to get the full benefit of this final trait. Do keep in mind, all of these do cost a little bit as far as their final traits. They're definitely not excessively cheap. They're almost as far as between a legend and a mythic as far as getting them fully traded. However, getting them leveled and getting your hands on a copy of one is super easy to do. But they do cost 30 of the arcane of the color in order to get them upgraded. Worst comes to worst, trait the first trait and use 2 small oranges to get them fully traded if there's one that you really end up wanting to use. However, if you farm for several hours for each of the explorers on the pure colors, you'll be able to get them. And to search for any of the pure colors, of course, all you have to do is go under your thing all the way in top left, go over to inventory, and go over to arcanes. And if you want, for example, arcane pure brown, simply go to KZL and boom, you're there, and just explore there. And if you can't do explore yet, just do quest line and then do explore. And you can end up getting a lot of arcanes that way in order to farm them if you wanted to do it the manual method to go and get them. But anyways, let's keep going over teams. So, as far as this one, it's centered around Defiance. Defiance has, as far as one of the stat increases, probably one of the better stat increases, is because Urskea troops are pretty nice, not to mention Sentinel hero class is among one of the better hero classes in the game, and it's probably actually the best hero class buff of the 6 of them, since Sentinel in itself is pretty much a mythic due to how strong Sentinel can end up being. In this case, we are using Sentinel a little bit less in order to end up using our troops a bit more, and that's, of course, is a Brown Guild War, so we could do double damage off of this. This thing also has double damage, but through Hunter's Mark, while also still having some score reduction, and we have this to be able to create skulls. It ends up exploding a gem and ends up creating skulls. AI might not be the best at using this, but hopefully the skulls will end up hitting, and you'll be able to go and have the AI cycle through that. And as a backup plan for the AI, it does have a summon. You end up creating a bunch of reds, and you can end up getting a summon off the Urskea crown, which is one of the reasons why we're also doing it like this. Since heroes all the way in the back, you can end up buffing up over all the extra turns that you'll get from your Defiance, and by the end of the battle, when your tanky hero is the only thing left with its skull reduction and its barriers, constant barriers through everything, you'll be able to go and just constantly keep summoning. The AI will be able to, and hopefully it can just fatigue out to the enemy team and end up winning an early game and mid game. So team to consider. Next one is, I believe, the only one that ends up using a mythic. However, do keep in mind this is a faction mythic. Faction mythics are way easier to obtain than, or sorry, did I say mythic? I meant legend. Faction legends are way easier to obtain than that of a standard legend. None of these use standard legends, but you are going to need to go get Harpy and Harpy Mage through throwing shards at the faction of Stonesong area anyways, so you'd probably have gotten the legend along the way of getting these troops, so it's really easy to a legend to obtain since they're all faction legends, or in this case a faction legend. So this ends up doing a nice amount of AoE damage. It's basically like a mythic in that it's essentially like an Infernus in a way, because it gets 5 explosions into a lot of damage spread out amongst the enemy. Main downside is it doesn't have a storm attached to it. It also does not have burn, and it also does not have what was the other mechanic? It doesn't have the capability of obfuscating submerge. So if the enemy has submerge, it will unfortunately do nothing, whereas Infernus does do something, but pretty great alternative for early on in the game and mid-game, and at pretty much any point throughout the game. You can end up buffing it quite a bit, obviously. This does a Strix bonus. This entire team is Strix. You can end up using Stormcaller hero class if you have a good weapon, but given that there wasn't really any good weapons to slot here in many cases, since a lot of the ultra easy to obtain weapons aren't necessarily too good, with a few exceptions like Mountain Crusher, Mang, Essence of Evil, Skeleton Key, and a few others, or Scale Shield, but a lot of colors lack, particularly double colors, lack accessible early game options. So in that case, you could just end up going pretty much just all into the faction, simply using the new Guardian, and this will be fine. And if you need to, Harpy would probably be the thing that you would replace out for Stormcaller hero class if you have a weapon that would synergize decently with the team, and you would just use Queen Zachi as your main damage source, whereas this thing would end up doing the rest of the cleanup of the fact that it does, of course, double to all the yellows that your defend team will be facing. As far as the final few, defend red. This is one of the other decent ones in that it gives a bonus to all Tauruses. Taurus bonus being pretty good since Tauruses actually increase their damage based on this kind of increase. So this is actually probably one of the better ones now that I think about it, other than their Scale one, since Tauruses are really dependent on having higher stats, and this is something that is centered around having higher stats. So with this, we are using a somewhat version of that Moneylender team, just a much cheaper version of this that doesn't use any legends or mythics. This you end up getting, I believe, around 25 all hero masteries, which if you did it all even, I believe you would get by level 150 or so. The ferocity is just here for the counter to reds, obviously for Red Guild War. We're using Shaman hero class to make this team almost pure Taurus, with the only exception being Moneylender. Reason for Moneylender is we can end up creating a lot of red, and everything on this team and Tauruses in general do use a lot of red, and this will just be one of the better mana generator methods. We can simply just get gold off the extra turns in order to feed him up to his boost ratio. He does not require a lot of gold in order to reach it, and with his 25% gold gain, if you happen to have them fully traded, would be even easier to do so. And the AI would just be able to use all of its damage here and have two things that end up doing double damage, because this thing does double damage if it has higher attack, which it should easily be able to do with 4 additional attack per extra turn, and having one of the high space attacks in the game, as well as this thing, which just does double damage to all reds, which will be the entirety of the enemy team if on a Red Guild War defend. Other than that, this one's a little bit more of the clunkier one, just because there isn't too many good low-level Nagas as far as synergy in regard to that. However, do keep in mind Assassin hero class does count as a Naga, and that's probably the most relevant thing that it would end up synergizing with. You can end up doing this with Mang or similar options, just to go for all-in skull option for the AI and have a really high skull damage for every single skull you take, while also having, if you happen to have it fully traded, a 10% chance to instantly kill the last enemy every single time you take a skull, and just have a really heavy skull-oriented team in that regard. For this, we have ourselves the Naga bonus that we end up getting off the extra turns, while having all of our blue counters here. This doesn't end up giving much of an effect since it has a boost ratio off of poison, but in order to utilize that, we do have Poison Master. This will also act as one of our mana generators in order to go and not only poison, but mana generate for us. And Marilith, which is probably one of the more interesting things on this team, is the fact that if you boost this thing's magic enough, if you get to 64 destroys, you will destroy the entire board. That is insanely good value. It's similar to that of Egg Thief, however, there hasn't really been any viable way to get Naga to full magic in a similar way to that of Egg Thief, and there still isn't. However, the closest thing you can do now is use Treachery. Treachery with a bunch of extra turns into that of a Marilith will end up giving you eventually enough magic so that you can end up going and getting a full board destroy. That in combination with other factors that exist in the game that you might not have in early game, of course, but of course with other factors that exist in the game just in general, if we end up going magic and magic and magic here, we can substantially increase the amount of destroy that she has, bringing her even closer immediately to that of a full board destroy. Obviously, still won't have it on first turn, but that in combination right there is 41. Not to mention in Guild Wars, you're probably going to have higher magic in general, possibly, let's say, a 47 at that point, a 6 additional. And then with an additional 4 per extra turn, you're going to be getting a lot of magic to the point where she's basically going to be a Egg Thief. And not just an Egg Thief, but an Egg Thief that's almost operational from the start without even needing another troop in order to make it work. Of course, we're kind of using Treachery in that case, but if you're doing a Blue Guild War Defend, you're pretty much using Treachery anyways in some instances, particularly early game and mid game and such like that, now that it's going to be a pretty viable option for doing so. So definitely something to consider if you're using anything, Treachery into Marilith. Unfortunately, one thing you can't do is multiple Merilith, of course, do make sure every single one of these troops are unique. You may notice across all 24, I don't think I made any mistakes, but these should all be unique. So if you did want to set all of these, you theoretically could. Of course, make adjustments if you have better upgrades for anything. But these are just low level, just to kind of get something slotted if you don't have anything. And all 6 of these Guardians, you simply throw, you saw it earlier too, you throw like 10 seal keys, 20 seal keys, you probably got 1 copy of each of these already. So they're really easy to at least get your hands on, which it will make it easy to build into from early game perspectives. But anyways, and through mid game. But anyways, lastly here, we have ourselves purple. This is centered around, of course, the Rashkas, since we have ourselves the Rashka bonus over here. It ends up gaining a boost ratio based on their life, basically meaning this is very similar to that of the other thing from the kingdom. Oh gosh, I keep forgetting its name. Why do I always forget this thing's name? It is, let's see. The easiest way to get there would be to go under Rashkas and just do it by troop type because we're already underneath its color. But this troop right here, why do I always forget your name? Shadowhunter. It's the same general premise of Shadowhunter. Shadowhunter has a 3-to-1 boost ratio based on all enemy lives and hits the strongest enemy. This is kind of the same thing. It deals damage to an enemy and a random enemy. However, it has that life boost ratio, however, slightly lower at a 4-to-1 rather than a 3-to-1. However, it hits 2 enemies rather than 1 enemy. And you also get to choose one to target, so it's AI. So I guess technically both of them are random since it's AI controlling it. But still, it's going to be 2 hits rather than 1, while only being a slightly worse boost ratio, meaning it's going to do more damage than Shadowhunter for less mana cost, which is pretty cool. And on top of that, it still has its better traits than that of Shadowhunter. Here we have a Mountain Crusher just to go and accumulate some mana. This will go into Snow Hunter. You could end up using a hero class, which is why I did here. Instead of using something like a Sun Spear hero class, which counts as a Rashka, I ended up going for something that has Hunter's Mark. Reason for this is one of the more viable Rashkas that currently exist in early game is that of Shadowhunter. And with Shadowhunter, we will be able to do triple damage to anything that has Hunter's Marked. That triple damage, of course, will get even higher with the extra 4 magic that we gain per extra turn, meaning every extra turn we do theoretically is 12 additional damage to our Snow Hunter here. So that's pretty relevant, to say the least. Not to mention, with all the Hunter's Mark that we'll have already from our hero, that will synergize with the fact that that 2 times damage stacks with this 2 times damage for 4 times skull damage. So we'll have that as an option for the defend team. And other than that, Rashka Free Blood is a kind of troop that I thought might end up getting viability eventually. It's kind of still a little bit down there, but from an early game perspective, it's definitely usable. Very low rarity on the ultra rare, and you can end up doing a bit of explosions. One nice thing about using Thief hero class in this instance is on top of the fact that it can Hunter's Mark every single time you do a extra turn, it also has a gold gain every single turn. So this you'll be able to synergize into the fact that he explodes based on gold. And yeah, every 10 gold he has, he'll end up doing, or sorry, every 5 gold he has, will end up doing 1 additional explosion. And he also gains 10 gold per cast. So pretty much after a few turns, he'll be operational. And he'll basically be like a second level Mountain Crusher that can do a little bit of poke damage. And that's good because it'll increase the poke damage even more by the fact that you'll keep gaining extra stats off your extra turns. So it should end up functioning pretty easily. And one other nice thing about this hero class is even though some of the other hero classes we were using with the other ones might need the hero class to be leveled quite a bit, this one does not need to be leveled barely at all to be able to use a good majority of its benefit. You need to get this thing to 10. And this you get literally after 1 battle, and this you would get potentially do within an hour of just grinding out the hero class. So really, really quick to get this upgraded, more so than any of these other hero classes, because you get almost the full viability of this hero class, not the full, but most of its usefulness out of simply getting it to 10 in this team. So really, really easy to build. But anyways, guys, I believe that is everything that I wanted to mention for now for the 4.7 patch. I know it went a little bit longer than I kind of intended, but I did want to cover as much as possible, and I figured I'd mention it all in one video rather than kind of breaking it up. I will have timestamps, of course, in the description, though, a little bit, just to make it, or in the comments below as well, in order to make it a little bit easier to navigate. However, that will do it. And if you still have any other questions, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below as well. Hope you all have a wonderful time with the version 4.7 patch. Next patch probably won't be till mid-January or so, and it's probably going to be a mini patch. 5.0 is definitely coming next year, so it's going to be something pretty huge. We're also probably going to be seeing troop rework sometime early-ish next year, because the final hero class will be added, I believe, sometime in April. And at that point, prior to that even, they're probably going to rework all of hero classes to make sure that they're a bit more balanced. And now that all the hero classes are added against the game. They'll want to, of course, bounce them to some degree. What they're doing after hero classes, we don't know. But anyways, we'll know more soon. Hope you all have a wonderful week. Best of luck with everything, and goodbye.